Started with tonight's meeting. I think Vice Mayor Lutz is on her way. She's just not here yet. So we'll go with council meeting follow-up. Does anybody have anything from last week that we need to follow up on? Councilman Cathy.
Thank you. I probably misspoke at the meeting the other night about being hoodwinked, but I just wasn't fully understanding what was going on. And I think after reviewing it, it was a very amiable solution. So I wanted to let everybody know, and I'm sorry that Kristen's not here. I will pass that on to her at the end of the meeting. But I wanted to pass that on to everybody.
Okay. Anybody else? Nothing? Okay, we'll move on to amending ordinance number 18-17, Rocky Mountain franchise. Mr. Henley.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This is an extension of the current franchise agreement that we have with Rocky Mountain Power, Pacific Corp. This is for the franchise agreement, but for the power company, it's a general utility easement that grants them access to our streets and gutters and curbs and overhead connections and the like. So this is important for both the utility as well as the city of Casper. The term of our current provision is 20 years. It began December the 13th, 2017. And as it began, we started with a 7% franchise fee. This is money that will go directly to the city. It is a pass-through fee. And it did have a sunset provision, though, that if we did not move before 2021 to, and there's a particular date in 21, but 2021, and then the fee would revert to a 5% franchise fee as opposed to the 7% franchise fee. The memo talks about the effect that would have on the city's budget. And based upon that, I think it would be the preference of the city manager and probably of Tom Pitlick as well, if you would consider pushing this forward for the ordinance process, having a public hearing established, and then the 3 readings to see if you want to continue the franchise fee at the 7%, or if you want to let it lapse back to the 5%.
Okay. Mr. Henley, I have a question on that, and I was talking to Carter about it earlier today, but so we're at a 7%, and if we don't inform them in writing that we want to stay at the 7, it automatically goes back to the 5. Do we ever look at moving that franchise fee up to maybe an 8%? And I know that probably equates to almost $500,000 is my understanding, but do we have the option of doing that?
Under the current option, under the current ordinance, and if it is approved, we would have the option in the future to move that up, at least pursuant to our agreement with Rocky Mountain Power and pursuant to the state statutes that we currently have. However, the past legislative session or 2, they've talked about that, thinking we want to put some type of a cap on these franchise fees. So whether that would become a possibility, or given the state's dire financial consequences and their fear and concern about stopping the direct distribution, that may be an option that they would want us to take a look at. But in the past, it's been kind of looked down upon, frankly. To basically 7% seemed to be kind of the top limit of where it seemed they would be relatively comfortable with. Most of the franchise fees are probably not that high. Most would run around 5% as opposed to the 7%. So right now we're kind of at the edge where people have felt comfortable in the past. Given current economic circumstances, I'm just not sure where we'll come down.
Okay. Councilman Hopkins.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, and those of you who were here when we did this, I think we were at 5 or less. And we moved it from 5 to 7. Does that sound right? I think so. However, we were going to, like I said, there's a sunset provision in it, but I support keeping it in there.
Okay. Councilman Johnson?
Yeah, I do. This goes to it was to go to CADA, correct? Isn't that what the whole issue was about? Didn't this franchise fee go to CADA, or the group formerly known as CADA?
Mr. Henley?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Johnson. Councilman Johnson is right in part. In a prior city manager did in fact reach an agreement with CADA, so they would have some kind of level funding too. So I think 1% of the franchise money from this franchise is basically earmarked to go to CADA, whatever the.
Advanced Casper.
Advanced Casper, thank you, Councilman Powell, currently. And I know there was some talk of that in past councils about whether that was appropriate and whether that should be continued, and if so, the duration of it, that type of thing. But you're exactly right that there is a 1% that is kind of set aside for those purposes of economic development.
Councilman Huber?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Henley, are you, I think I just heard the $500,000 figure being about what that 1% amounts to, is that correct?
It basically, if we were to drop from the 7% back to the 5%.
Well, I'm talking about what goes to CADA under that.
Oh, what goes to CADA? As I recall, it was,
It's a number that's inflated each year.
okay, I think it probably is a moving target. I think when I last looked at it, it was in the $400,000+ range. And I'm not positive, but that's my recollection.
I remember we had a contract.
It was about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if we want to, in any manner, further discuss that allocation to CADA or not. I don't know that we need to bog down this discussion about amending this thing now, but maybe at a future work session or something, we should revisit that just to make sure, you know, that how that's going and stuff.
We could add that on to a future work session and just make a decision to move forward or not on this tonight.
I'm not saying that I'm advocating that we should not give that to CADA. I just would like to know the exact number and maybe get some input from CADA about what they're doing with that.
Okay.
Perfect. Good deal.
Mr. Henley?
Thank you, Mayor. Right now in 2021, it looks like 2020 would be $428,729 is kind of the anticipated amount, and in 2021, $433,016. So I think we are right there.
Okay. Councilman Bates?
So I looked into this, and I didn't realize that the part of this, the 6%, actually comes out of each one of Casper's electric bill, that it comes out of that and goes to it. But I do want to point out that because I thought the same thing about raising it to actually 9%, until I realized two things. That it does come out of our bills, so that would be more added on to the citizens of Casper. But on top of it, when I was looking into it, news article that was done June of this year, I do believe, or March 6, 2020, that Rocky Mountain Power proposal, a utility will decrease a rate for industry customers by 0.8%, but increase rates for the average resident customer by about $3.69 per month. That will be coming up for next year, for 2021. So I would agree with not raising that and keeping it at 7 cents or 7%, since Rocky Mountain is looking at raising the residents' rates on that.
Anybody else? Councilman Johnson?
I would support letting it sunset back to the 5%.
I'm in favor of keeping it at 7%, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Vice Mayor Lutz.
So let's just call it 1%. Obviously, it's a flat number, but X percent that goes to forward Casper or advanced Casper. Does the remaining amount go into the general fund?
Indeed, it does.
Okay, it does. Okay.
Okay, so you need an answer as to whether we move forward on 7% or let it sunset on 5, correct?
Yes, if we move forward with an ordinance to stop the sunsetting, and so we need to establish a public hearing and then have 3 readings after that.
Okay. So I guess a thumbs up if we want to move forward with 7%, thumbs down would be let it sunset at 5. All right? Looks like we've got 2 against and the rest 4. Okay, anything else on that?
I think that will be it. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, now we're going to move on to the massage therapy continuing discussion. There's a couple things I want to say before we start this. First of all, this is a work session, so it's not open to the public unless you've been asked to come here to talk. And there have been some people that have been asked to come talk because frankly, they've called and voiced their opinion either for or against, and or for just changes within the ordinance itself. So that's why they're coming up to talk this evening. We have not taken it to the floor yet, so there'll be a public hearing date set, and there will be 3 readings. We haven't even had the first reading on it yet, so I want to make that clear. It still has 3 readings to go through. We simply brought it back in here because there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and we want to do it right and write this ordinance the proper way. So that's why we're here with the discussion tonight. So with that being said, Mr. Henley.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, as you know, we had a work session on this and put it out to the public. My office, I know, had contacted several people just by going and picking out 5 people randomly, I think from Google, and approaching them. And we had some other people contact our office back. And while a number of massage therapists were supportive of the thought of it, others were not supportive at all. Some had specific concerns about specific provisions, which I thought were helpful. And you could tell that they were being thoughtful about their comments and the like. And so, given the fact that there were so many comments, I believe, and really trying to make a cohesive work product before we brought it up for the public hearing and before you started to look at it on the floor and to vote, you had asked that this come back for a work session. In an effort to try to facilitate that, we did take a lot of the comments that we had received, and particularly the concerns, and put them, redline them into what the original draft ordinance, the body of that. And so the original draft ordinance, as you recall, was based upon regulations coming out of Laramie County Health Department, and they have an ordinance down in Cheyenne. It was that provision that really seemed to raise the hackles on a number of people's backs. And so based upon that, then we did redline in with some proposed changes and modifications, I think, to maybe soften it up, maybe not make the references to sexual activity quite as harsh and abrasive, and also to, I think, make it easier for people that have established practices here to be grandfathered in. We also then modified some of the requirements. The fees are $100 for a business entity, $60 for a massage therapist, but if it's a solo practitioner, just the $100 fee for the business entity will suffice for the application fee, and renewal fees would be 50% after that for these individuals. At least that's what's currently there. You can modify that as you see fit and as you hear from the therapist, as well as the individuals, such as the health department or whoever. Some of the comments I did receive were in fact from the Natrona County Health Director, asking about things such as medical examination, TB tests. He said, no, those really aren't necessary in our county. We have a very low vector of TB, and realistically, physical therapists do similar type of work, and they don't have to go through checking to make sure that they're physically able to complete the work of a physical therapist. So those would be one of the red line matters that you'll see before you. I'm not exactly, what I'm hoping that by the end of the night, if you decide to move forward with this, that maybe we can come up with some type of a cleaner work product for you to take into that first public hearing and first reading. And so perhaps whether you want all of the proposed red line changes included, or if you want to just pick and choose some of those, but so then we could kind of start and not have any red lines on the one that would go before you the first time around, and still, of course, let people comment on the portal and or contact you individually or our office. As I understand it, no one has yet commented on the portal, whereas, we have had, my legal assistant and I have had quite a few conversations. In fact, someone who I spoke with at length last Friday was again at our door today and had some more thoughts on the matter. And of course, some of you, and we've shared some of these from practitioners here in town, rather lengthy type of comments, which again, I thought showed that they had been reading it and were pretty well thought out. So with that, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions you have, and I know that you have some speakers here too, and maybe if you wanted to listen to them, and then we can move forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilman Powell.
Thank you, John. This is a question I should know the answer to, but I don't. What other professions, if any, does the city license that are not licensed by the state?
There are very few. When you start looking at those in this particular provision, businesses affecting public health, which is where we decided to put this kind of at the suggestion of the Natrona County Health Department. Food trucks is one, and remember food trucks, and we went through a lot with respect to food trucks, but that is one which fits within that area. Others, such as tattoo artist, I think there's some other words for similar type of things. I don't believe those are regulated by the state, but I could be wrong. But I know that our health department goes to some significant lengths in regulating them and checking things out there because of possibly blood-borne pathogens and that type of thing. But with respect to other entities such as the barbers and the cosmetologists, those are state regulated. So the only one I can think of that I know for sure would be food trucks, mobile food vendors.
Tattoo parlors. Follow up, if I may, Mr. Mayor, excuse me. Without looking, I wouldn't expect you to know this chapter and verse, but with respect to the tattoo artists, do we have similar kind of language about dress and the type of table that needs to be used and cleanliness and those kind of things? Are those things in that ordinance?
In those, such as for a physical therapist, those type of businesses, they would be licensed by the state, so we would not have those type of regulations for those type of businesses. And again, looking at the original question, Councilman Powell, swimming pools, we actually have swimming pools examined. Food manufacturers, food distributors here are examined locally. Delicatessens actually are monitored here locally. But as far as someone, with a hands-on type of business other than the tattoo artist and the like, I can't think of any others.
The tattoo would probably be the closest analogy if we were looking for something similar. Would that be fair?
I would think so, Councilman.
You are amazing, by the way, that you could call that up on short notice, but
Thank you.
thank you.
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. kind of along the same question to Councilman Powell. You know, we've got a lot of things in here about who's inspecting what. You gotta have bathrooms, you gotta have sinks. But we also have provisions elsewhere in our code where you have home business. I know one of the things in that you can only have a sign that's 12 by 12 for your home business, whatever your business is. If you make dog food treats, or if you're a bookkeeper, or you help out with computing, are you gonna make those guys have the same bathroom requirements? And, I mean, you know, what's good for the goose, good for the gander. And I just think we're kind of heading down the wrong road here. If somebody wants to do this in their spare bedroom, in their home, how does that jive if you want to keep books for somebody in your office at home? Are we going to have the fire department in? Are we going to have to be up to code for a commercial code? Plumbing code would be the same way? I don't know. I think we're stretching this a little bit, guys.
Councilman Cathy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I was interested in, and I don't believe it's something that we have looked at I know I haven't been able to do it, but by some of the questions, I'm not sure that we have looked at and really put into effect what state statute is as far as barbers, physical therapists, occupational therapists, chiropractors, dentists, these types of people. And I would like to see where those come from and where those come in, because they are still dealing with public health as well. And not to dissuade anybody that's here from speaking tonight, I still have no problem with that. But would we be better off to try to figure out and get some copies of those along with the existing ordinance that we've got, and sit down with those ordinances, with what we've got, and have the therapists, with some of the people that, according to the emails, have been in the state organizations and things like that, and have just, for right now, not a continuing working group, but a short committee to sit down and spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours with several of those people from the community, along with a couple of council members, and sit down and go through all of these ordinances. And it may take a couple of 3 weeks and several meetings, but to try to come up with an amiable solution that would meet, and if they can get it to go ahead and go forward to the state, would then go ahead and the state could pick this up and go ahead and expand it statewide, which I think is really where a lot of the people here would like to see it go. And I've heard a lot of other people mention that really, for it to be truly effective, it needs to be a statewide licensing board to be able to do all of the checking. But I didn't know if that might be a possible solution, rather than us trying to make sausage sitting up here at the council table, which I know, outside of physical therapists, mending my body back after stupid things I do, I've never been to anybody, and I've never been to a massage therapist, but I have been to physical therapists. And there is a big difference too, and Mr. Henley alluded to it, is that tattooing, you are dealing with bloodborne pathogens, which is a whole different ball game than non-invasive, so to speak, type of massage therapist. So I was wondering if that might be a possibility to try to move forward and get an amicable solution, compromise to everybody.
Good. Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to continue to move forward with this. I don't know for sure that we have to have a 16-page ordinance on this. I would like to continue working on this. But as to the, tattoo artists, yes, they have the potential of bloodborne pathogens. Anyone that is coming in direct skin-to-skin contact with another human being, there is the potential for pathogen transfer. I think that we do need to have some regulation on this. Frankly, I have to say that I was shocked that there's no, that this field is just apparently wide open like it is, that there are no state or statutes or city ordinances or county rules or anything like that. And I want to preface any consideration that we do here. I have personally benefited very greatly over my life from very beneficial therapeutic massages. I believe in the professionalism of therapeutic masseuses. I have benefited from that. I consider that to be a very, very honorable, decent, great profession. The masseuses that I have ever dealt with have all been absolutely of the most professional, impeccable way of doing things, just very, very good and positive. I want to see the whole thing that way, and frankly, I do not have any faith in our state legislature moving on this. They move at a glacial pace, and I would much rather see the city of Casper, as I have said in the past, be out in the lead on this, and maybe that we can come up with an ordinance that the state could then say, oh, hey, all we got to do is enact what the city of Casper enacted, and let's get going. So I want to continue moving forward on this. I would resist Councilman Cathy's idea. I'm not against sitting down and visiting with people and trying to come up with the best thing, but I don't want to see this delayed and drug out and die a terrible, painful death over a long period.
Councilman Bates.
I agree with what Hopkins said, that we need to look at exactly what he said. What, if they're doing it in their home, how does that fall under the code? And I'm not seeing that in here. And then what Cathy said, I agree. I don't want this to be rushed. I think if we want to get ahead of the rest of the state, then let's do it right and right the first time. Then put in what we think, hear what we hear, and put it in. But I agree with Cathy. Let's do more research. Let's do more visitation. And I'd rather see us do it once right than to keep coming back with it because we see something that we didn't know that somebody else brought up to us, as far as I think. So if we hold off, and I'm not saying for a year or anything, I'm just saying let's just get all our facts and everything all together before we move this to the floor.
Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor Lutz, and I'll come back to you.
Just really quick, we modeled this after Laramie County's ordinance. Is that correct, John?
Yes, based upon Laramie County Health Department's regulations, which were adopted pursuant to their ordinance down in Cheyenne.
Did they, sorry, we don't need to get into the depths of it. Best question. Have they had like enormous pushback from the community, or have they had, a bunch of problems of people like losing their businesses, et cetera, et cetera?
That I do not.
Okay, but maybe we can reach out and just maybe get some feedback from them in the interim. Okay.
Councilman Cathy.
Yeah, in answer to Councilman Huber's concern about delaying and killing, that is not what I want to do. If we could get a committee, I would just as soon start meeting next week. And I would be willing to volunteer as a council member to help facilitate or carry on. But by no means do I want to put this off till next year or anything else. I think we're just potentially rushing into it, and I can see us heading down the path of what we just went through with continuing amendments at every reading and even amendments at third reading. And I would like to see us come up with a good ordinance that basically, even for the first one, we get a lot of attaboys and girls, but we get a lot of kudos for what we've come up with. And basically, the public hearing on first reading becomes it, and we move on rather than the continuation of what we've had. That's all I'm trying to do.
Okay, Councilman Johnson.
Yeah, I agree with Councilman Kathy as well, because, I mean, we saw what happened with the animal control ordinance, and I think that that's where we're headed with this. None of us up here are masseuses. We don't know a thing about the industry. Laramie and Cheyenne don't have outlying municipalities like Casper does, and so I worry that if we jump into this and end up over-regulating, that we push business to those outlying areas rather than keeping it in Casper. So if we're going to do this, we need to do it right and not be piecemealing it on third reading.
Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. John, if I may ask you another question. Obviously, a lot of work was put into this. We have a number of people who feel, I guess, mischaracterized, or that they don't appreciate that they might be suspected of sex trafficking or running a house of prostitution. Could you tell us how would we be limited if we adopted the recommendation that we simplify this to, you have the training, you have the insurance, and you have not been convicted of an offense involving violence, sexual misconduct, or illegal drugs? How would this hamstring our efforts to control or eliminate houses of ill repute?
In looking at that, I think one of the factors, as I understand it, Councilman, is that basically by saying that anyone who uses the term massage within their moniker would have to fall within that type of licensure provision. And the licensure provision, the advantage of that with respect to the illicit area is basically so that I think that there can be eyes on and maybe deter people from coming in, because you're going to have the fire department looking at you, the health department looking at you, the police department doing background checks, things of that nature. So that I think could almost all be done to some extent by just a pretty simple permit process. You know, the permit requires this, which would include a background check and, you know, once over by the fire department to make sure there are no obvious hazards or whatever. And provide some background information about the applicants, and to make sure that if they are non-resident, non-permanent resident status, that they have to provide a copy of their passport or something to verify that they're not being held against their will.
I guess if I could say it in a different way, if someone has the 500 hours of training, in theory, they would be trained to perform the massage techniques in an appropriate manner, and they would have appropriate tools and an appropriate space to comply with the training requirements. What risks to the public do you think would be created if it was streamlined to, you have the training, you have the insurance, and you haven't committed a felony? What could you give us a scenario where we would have someone exposed to a risk that your proposal is designed to eliminate?
And I think that, you know, for the most part, those risks would be the same as they would be, you know, currently, because right now it is unregulated. People get on with it fine. You know, they establish clientele whether they've had the training or not. It's just a question, I think, for maybe safety, though I cannot think, even when I was in private practice, hearing about massage therapists being sued because a patient was injured. I cannot think of a case where that's occurred. And I don't remember reading any cases, not that I would have that good a recollection or that broad of a reading. But I think basically what the statute was trying to do was just kind of set some baseline type of hurdles for people to make sure that they could accomplish those. And there could be just lesser of those, like you say, the training, the fact that you're not a felon, and you know, that you have liability insurance may be sufficient. But you know, that would be I think a council decision as to those factors, and whether the physical therapist, or excuse me, massage therapist would believe that would be sufficient for some of their counterparts. I don't know.
if I may just follow up, if that were in place, would you, obviously, this was designed in many ways to give tools to law enforcement to deal with, we always talk about the Tokyo massage, the next Tokyo massage. Would we not be able to deal with the next Tokyo massage if we streamlined it to these three things?
Again, I think you would have a certain bite at that because you're going to have the permitting process as long as you have some type of background check involved there. And obviously, if you're going to find out if they have the 500 hours of training and, make sure that there's no felony conviction, you're going to have to do a little bit of digging into their background and to their, to see if it's a true ID that they're giving you or just fake IDs. So I think it's certainly a possibility, and it certainly would make it better than it is currently.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Pacheco.
My experience has been that sometimes we kind of get in the way of policy. It's not very perfect. And I think we sometimes go overboard. And I think that there's obviously a lot of people here in regards to that. And I think there's a couple things that we need to do. One, I think we need to think about, are we going too much? Where can we find a middle ground that's going to do what we need to do and make that a policy that is going to benefit the business owners and benefit the community to do that. Also, if there are people here to speak, I think I'd really like to hear them and hear what they have to say as we're trying to go through this process. And it sounds like the mayor has had some people want to come up here to talk a little bit. I think we need to maybe be quiet for a minute and then listen to what they have to say and maybe start figuring out what we have to hear from the professionals a little bit, kind of what Steve was saying a little bit. But I think we can kind of sit there and start bringing up a lot of stuff when we don't know what we're talking about. So if we could maybe, I'm going to make a motion to move forward to see if we can listen to a few people that are here to talk. Maybe they're for it and maybe they're against it, but I want to hear what people have to say, because I'm hearing people saying, oh, this is the worst thing that could ever happen to me, and then I'm hearing this is a great thing that's going to happen to me. So right now, I have no idea where I sit on this issue, but I really would like to get a good understanding to make a really good decision to help out whatever decision there needs to be done. So that's where I'm sitting.
Thank you. Okay, so we will move forward. One thing that I do want to say is that this was taken from Laramie County. This is an ordinance that they put into place down there. We're working off of that. This is not a creation that we didn't just dream this up and create it here. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to make what's already in place somewhere else better and make it fit our community. Second of all, I know that you guys have tried to take it to the state and it's not getting traction because nobody wants to bring this up in the state. So the way I look at it is if the city of Casper and the city of Cheyenne are going to take the lead on this and they're going to make a change and put it into ordinance, then it's going to help get traction to where the state will step in and do something about it. So that's the main two things that I want to say. I also want everybody to understand this has just as much to do with the health department and health regulations going into this as it does illicit activity that takes place by people that are not doing, there's illegal activity that's taking place. So don't think that this is an ordinance that we're trying to pass just so we have a different way of taking care of those type of problems, because there are health concerns that need to be taken up too, and that's why we want to do this the right way. So with that, Mr. Henley, do we have a list of who we have coming to speak here tonight? And I do see that Anna's here if you want to talk tonight too from the health department. So.
Thank you. I do know that Ms. Kinder is here, and I think that she was anticipating being able to visit. And there were three other individuals, including Ms. Aguilar, who was here the first time that we had the reading, Stephanie Sneed, and Savannah Wilkinson. I think they've all been asked by the clerk's office to come in, those three. And then Ms. Kinder, I know, had looked at some of the efforts that we made in the past and probably has some ideas on those.
Okay, so it just seems reasonable to me that we start in that order. So if that works for you, Anna, I'd appreciate it if you'd come up and tell us your thoughts from the health department, and then we'll work our way down the list from there.
Are we gonna time this? We do everybody else.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Basically, we've been working with Eric Nelson, our county attorney, who's also been in correspondence with Mr. Henley. In order for the health department, there's components that are on there that are absolutely something that we would do. The way it's written kind of is in and out, and so that's where we kind of feel like we could make some clarification moving forward. If we wanted to do anything as far as inspection, obviously we need to get permission from our board and draft rules that would go into that to do it the right way. And I think that's what everybody is talking about, making sure that we do things the right way. I am an occupational therapist, and I know, like, I look at my fellow massage therapy people more in that vein of making sure, like, the licensure in the state legislator, but maybe we're not there, so I understand what you're trying to go at. I see, like, there's two issues here where we're looking at making sure we don't have those places that are not what we're looking for, like, but the therapeutic massage places, like, that they're taken care of, they know what they need to do. I've spent a great deal of time with one particular one who has been talking to me. Like, everybody recognizes the need to have this done and that it would be appropriate. The health department would be with following our, getting approval from the board, drafting rules, and we would put out for public comment and then have the board pass that rule. And then we could fit into the ordinance where we would do inspections similar to like what we do with the tattoo and food licensure. Is that pretty much what you would? Yes, so Ruth Hild is one of the environmental health. She's a manager for that department, and so they're the ones that are responsible for some of those things. So while we resisted the first draft of it because we're not, not wanting to be the ones that call and ensure the person went through schooling, we want to make sure that the place is safe and, from a public health standpoint, but we have to do our own kind of work to move along through this process as well.
Okay. And I guess a question to you, Mr. Henley, when we talk about the education and background and things like that, that's something that you would, Anna, you would take care of the, I guess, the health perspective of it, but not necessarily the follow-up on backgrounds and education and whatnot. And that's why we have now changed it in this to go to the police department for them to do it, correct?
I believe that's correct, Mayor, that originally we thought that maybe the health department would do that just because of their more medical type of background, but that really didn't sound like that was within their wheelhouse, that really it's, if you're going to do background checks, you better have somebody else who just does that. So that's why it was delegated to the police department.
Okay.
So looking at the restrooms, the cleanliness, the towels, and all of those kinds of things, that's more in what we do for inspections rather than checking the nature of the person's licensure.
Okay. Councilman Cathy.
Ma'am, and I'm trying to find out for my own information now, but do you do these types of inspections for the physical therapists, the chiropractors, dentists? So you don't do them for any of those?
No, thank you, Councilman. Actually, those are done by the state. There are boards. For example, I'm an occupational therapist, so we have the Board of Occupational Therapies that's done by the state. But yeah, we do not do any of that currently.
Do you know roughly how often they do those inspections?
I don't know that they get routine inspections. It's more the licensure of the individual themselves. So I am licensed through the state, but I don't believe that they go in and inspect the therapy facilities, at least not for public health. We don't.
Okay, no, I was just here again, this gets back to
Yep.
what is the state and what are we requiring of other professionals that are similar types of of venues, so to speak. And that was why I was trying to figure out. And that was what I mentioned earlier about how does the state run their boards and their programs for the other occupations. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely, and just to add to that, if I may, just probably looking at from the standpoint that we would want to ensure, like, you know, they have where the massages are taking place because of whatever may transpire. That may be one of the reasons why it's written this way here, where it isn't so much in the other regards.
Thank you.
Councilman Pacheco.
And I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot, and you can probably go. Be quiet, Ray, I don't want to
It's been
talk.
a rough day, come on.
I apologize. I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot, but feel free to say, I really can't answer that in the best way. So have you had an opportunity to read this second draft of the ordinance? You have. Would you say in your opinion, and I'm not asking you to be a policymaker, obviously, in your opinion, is it too broad? Are we looking at, from a health standpoint, that we're looking at, is this too much? Or in your opinion, from the health department, if you could give me a little bit of on that. And if you can't answer that, or if my question's way too broad, you can sit and say, Councilman, that's not feasible.
So, Councilman, I would say that there's a lot in this, absolutely. I think, like, clearly identifying who's responsible for what, because you have some language in there that talks about the public health officer, then you have some things, like the police department is in charge of a lot, and that goes back to, like, will they have time to do those things? So I feel like it's a lot. As an occupational therapist, I pay my money and I have to get 16 continuing ed units a year. That's the extent of my licensure.
Okay.
I know this is a different setting and a different realm. We're trying to fit two things into one whole, I think.
Yep. Thank you. That's exactly what I was wondering. Thank you.
Councilman Bates, and then I'll come back to you, Councilman.
Ms. Senna, I have just like 3 questions. 2 of them are about the same. How long would it take for the board to create the rules, or for you guys to create the rules? And where would you draw them from? And then my other question is, would you have to make the rules different from a home massage therapy place to a business massage place?
Mayor Friel, may I please ask for?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Council, I'm Ruth Heald. I'm Program Manager for Environmental Health. As far as writing the regulations, I mean, we have looked at what they have in Laramie County, and I think from what I'm hearing is it's not quite the fit that we need for Casper. Whether there's any other templates that I could possibly locate, I'm not sure who else regulates at this level. I'd have to do some research on that. So depending on what could be found that is closer to what we're wanting, or the possibility that we just write our own on our own. So, there's that factor. So I couldn't really put a timeline on that, depending on what we can find and what we want for our community. But then once that occurs, we'd have to put it out for public comment. Is that, 45-day public comment? And then we'd have to have the hearing before the board so that they could vote on it, similar to the process that you have. So, I mean, I know in the new version, it did talk about having this in place within 3 months. I think that would be very difficult, giving it at least a 45-day public comment period after it's written.
Okay. And then my other question was, would it be different from a home to a business, as kind of Bob Hopkins brought up, but from a health department standard, would you have to look at the difference between the two?
We currently have no regulations that allow a business such as this to be run out of a home that's licensed. tattoo are not allowed to operate out of their homes. Let me qualify that a little bit. There are certain provisions where they have to have separate entryways. They can't enter a home and walk through the home to get to the, so it's a little limited to run it out of your home because most homes aren't built that way. You don't have separate entrances to rooms where you could use them. So that, I mean, comparing it to the tattoo facilities that we have licensed, and the one that I'm thinking of was actually a permanent cosmetic operation, but I don't know, we'd have to look at what it looks like out of a home because we've not licensed any of these businesses in the past out of homes.
Thank you.
Councilman Huber?
I have two questions. Are you telling me that if we passed an ordinance that had sufficient specificity to it, for instance, that said you will inspect for these specific things, that your department is telling you you would not be able to follow that ordinance without having to go through your rulemaking process? Because specifically what I'm getting at is, I don't think anybody's going to disagree with the idea that maybe an ordinance should include features such as that the therapists should be required to clean the massage table in between patrons, that they should be required to use clean linens, that they should be required to use clean towels, that they should be required to wash their hands in between people. Things that have that kind of specificity set forth in them. I'm having difficulty understanding where there would need to be any rulemaking done in order for you to enforce that. And so I don't understand where this idea that we'd have to go to our board and go through all these hearings and all that's coming from. If there's something where you guys could enlighten me on that, I'd appreciate that.
There's nothing that we currently do that is enforced through any of your city ordinances, actually, none of them. The ordinance within the city of Casper, the businesses affecting public health, all of those businesses currently have health department rules that we actually inspect from. And those, again, are ones where independent board, those are ones that have been debated by our board and approved by our board. So I don't know if there's anything Anna wants to add to that, but we're kind of going in a direction that is currently not.
Yeah, and I'm not meaning to be harsh on you guys, but I'm a little bit surprised to be hearing that if we enact an ordinance that deals with things in pretty great specificity and doesn't say that we're delegating to the health department to make rules and regulations to enforce this, I'm having difficulty understanding where that would be a big complicated process or a process at all.
I think that might be an Eric County.
Yeah, and if you could relay that question to him, because I really truly think that aspect of this conversation is, I don't see where that's coming from. I think that's a non-existent concern. But if you could relay that on to Mr. Nelson, and he might say, Huber, you're crazy. There's an obvious answer to that, and everybody knows that I'm crazy. And so, but anyway, though, the next part of the question that I would like to ask is if you could have a wish list for things that you would like to see from the county health department and city county health department perspective put into this kind of an ordinance, what would that wish list be?
So I think,
And if you want some time to think about that, you can really please do feel free to submit something later to us in writing or something like that, because I don't want to blindside you and then say, well, you didn't tell us, so blah, blah. But what I'd really like to know is what your wish list would be.
okay. Thank you. To kind of answer, I think a lot of it is the enforcement component of it. is if we find somebody that's out of compliance, then what do we do about it? So that's where I think that other conversation comes into play. But absolutely, we could look at the current ordinance as it's written and just identify those things that run very parallel to what we currently do with the health department and get that back to you, absolutely. And then get clarification from Mr. Nelson.
Councilman Hopkins.
Yeah, we haven't talked much about a couple things. You mentioned food trucks earlier, and I can just see somebody now, I want a massage truck. Or I want to come to your house and do it. I want to carry in this suitcase full of stuff, and I want to come in, I'll unfold my table and we'll do it. We haven't talked about that. So these are just things that, you know, we're talking about slowing down, and I think we probably ought to do that, because there's a lot of unanswered questions. To ask you guys to come in and just say, what would you like? I think, and I'm not being facetious or anything, but I think you guys need time to provide some input to us, and exactly how would it work? You know, if this has to be just a city ordinance, then we're gonna have to hire inspectors. And who's gonna do that?
Well, and I think that's what we're doing here, is we are slowing down. We obviously stopped this whole process so we could have these conversations. And there are people that go to people's homes and take their tables to them and do massage, so that's a very good point. But I think one of the questions I have is, how far is too far? Because you start looking at some of this and, you know, it's like Councilman Huber was saying, I mean, it makes sense that you would wipe down a table. It makes sense you'd put on new sheets and not reuse the last clients. But the question that I have is, we look at some of this the way it's written in here, is it really up to us to tell a massage therapist what they're going to wear and how far below or above the knee it should be? I mean, that's not, unless there's some health reason behind it, that you need to be in scrubs and a mask and whatever to do this. I think that that's really overreaching where we need to be.
So Mayor Farrell, I think that's where we're trying to do two different things here. We're trying to, you know, do the right thing to protect the public, but then we also have the illegal side of things. And so I think that's where it's really muddy. Like, that's where I can't get it, you know, straight in my head, trying to kill one bird with two stones, or, you know, whatever.
Okay.
Two birds.
Two birds, yeah.
Thank you. It's been a really long day, so.
Okay.
mean-
Councilman Powell.
Thank you. Anna, you mentioned your credentialing as an occupational therapist. So you have a license, you're required to have certain training, I assume pass some kind of licensure exam, go through contact hours or CEUs periodically. Does I suspect your license has a lot in common with mine. Does it say anything about the space within which you work? How you clean your tables or your equipment? Does it say anything about your dress or hours of operation? You're required to, I assume, abide by ethical standards in your profession, correct? And then there's a complaint procedure, I assume, or if someone feels that they are being mistreated or not treated properly, they can appeal to a board and file a complaint, and then that would be investigated, and you could lose your license if you had a significant violation, correct? So could you tell us, in your opinion, why is that not enough for a massage therapist?
Again, I think it goes back to figuring out the legal side of things and figuring out the professional therapeutic massage that does exist there. So therapeutic massage, I put them in the same pool as, you know, OT, PT, all of those entities. But I know that there is that illegal aspect that we're trying to deal with also in this ordinance.
Thank you.
I don't know if that answered it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Henley, who do we have next on the line?
We have Ms. Aguilar.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Hello, my name is Tracy Aguilar. I am the owner of Peak Performance Massage Therapy here in Casper, Wyoming. I have been a certified massage therapist since graduating in 2000 from the Harvard Massage School's Boulder College of Massage Therapy. I graduated with 1,108 hours of training. I am passionate about licensure in Casper for massage therapists because of public safety and integrity to my profession. Massage and massage therapy is defined as a healthcare service involving the external manipulation of pressure of soft tissue for therapeutic purposes. Massage therapy includes techniques such as tapping, compression, friction, gliding, kneading, shaking, and fascial and connective tissue stretching with or without the aids of superficial heat, cold, water, lubricants, or salts. Massage therapy does not include diagnosis or attempts to adjust or manipulate any articulations of the body or spine or mobilization of the articulations by the use of thrusting force. How many of you have ever received a therapeutic massage? Okay. Did you ask your therapist if they went to school? Did you ask your therapist if they graduated from an accredited school? Did you ask your therapist how many hours they completed in school? Where does your therapist practice? Out of his or her home? Out of an office building or an office? Right now, it is perfectly legal to get a massage in someone's bedroom. Is that safe? Is that professional? These are all important safety questions that the citizens of Casper, Wyoming and Natrona County need to be asking for their safety. Most clients don't think to ask these questions because they assume that we are licensed and they are governed by laws that are laws that cover cleanliness, education, and safety. We are not. Anyone can read a book, watch a YouTube video, and set up shop and practice massage. Is this something you're comfortable with? A certified massage therapist like myself has completed anywhere from 500 hours to 1,000 hours of training at an accredited institution. This means we are trained in things like ethics, anatomy physiology, pathophysiology, client communications, CPR, first aid, proper draping techniques, contraindications, and a variety of massage modalities, just to name a few. These are things a person cannot learn from their favorite YouTuber at home. Putting an ordinance in place would protect the public from people who are not trained and can hurt, abuse, an unsuspecting client. Putting an ordinance in place would make it clear who is safe to receive a massage from, and who is not. Putting an ordinance in place allows other healthcare providers, whom we work very closely with, to refer safely to massage therapists. I spoke with massage therapists in Cheyenne who currently operate under the very same ordinance. They are very happy with the ordinance and are grateful that their community sees them as a licensed professional within their community. I also did forward Mayor Friel several letters of support from important medical doctors within our community. As I mentioned in our last meeting together, COVID has touched our community. We have well over 70 massage therapists in this town, as well as classes full of potential massage therapists graduating every 6 months from Casper's very own massage school, Mosaic Massage School. That's well over 70 opinions on health and safety. An ordinance will require therapists to follow rules and regulations put in place by people who are experts. With that said, passing an ordinance that would require a massage therapist to operate with a license creates a safe community as well as brings integrity to the massage therapy profession. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? Councilman Pacheco.
Tracy, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Anna. Have you read this ordinance, the second draft?
Yes.
Can you give me your opinion on it and tell me what your thoughts? Is it too expansive? Are we going overboard, or are we, because I agree with what you're saying, 100%.
There are several items that I believe are very overreaching. However, I think it was revised to 300 hours, which I would oppose, that I would like to see 500 at the least. But there are a few things like how we dress, things like that are definitely overreaching. But for the most part, I think it has good bones to work from.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
and I'm putting you on the spot, so I promise that if you don't know this exact answer, but I know at one point in time, we had talked about something, isn't it like 48 states in the United States regulate massage therapists, and we are one of the 2 that do not? So I want
I've
to
heard
keep saying that and
4,
keep reminding
so
people of that.
I heard between 2 and 4.
Okay, so
There's some
somewhere around
states
there.
that are on the, yeah,
Okay,
us in Kansas for sure.
for sure. Okay.
Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, ma'am, I just want to make sure that I didn't over-understand or read too much into what you said, but what I heard you say is that the massage therapists down in Cheyenne are happy working under this ordinance and they find it to be workable and they're cool with it?
Yes, my colleagues down there actually operate and don't even realize, they just pay their fee and operate as professionals.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did they say anything to you like, well, we sure wish that they'd change this feature
No,
or
in
that
fact, they had to go
feature?
back and read the ordinance. So, I mean.
Okay,
they
so
pay
they're
their- they
cool
pay
with
their
it.
money, they do their background checks, they do their fingerprints, and they have a clean, safe office.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Eckler, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Ms. Kinder. What risk to the public do you think would be created if this was scaled down to simply say, you have to have 500 hours of training, you have to have liability insurance, and you have to pass background check?
I think that's a good place to start, for sure.
I mean, that would eliminate all of the discussion about the space, the dress, the cleanliness. Again, like it is in my profession, none of those things are regulated for
Right.
psychologists.
I would agree.
But I do have to follow ethical standards
Mm-hmm.
and can be sanctioned if I fail to do so. But this would make this ordinance, 100 words instead of 16 pages.
Would be a lot easier.
Would you see, and a lot of work went into writing all of this, so I don't want to, so I'm asking the question seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Could you see some risks associated with scaling it down to that?
So you would have licensure, the 500 hours.
Liability insurance and pass a background check.
I believe that we need some way to monitor cleanliness. We're currently under a pandemic where the governor has mandated, they actually closed my profession down for a month. So I think it's very important that we have some kind of eyes on the cleanliness as well, sanitary.
Thank you.
Councilman Kathy.
Is the Cheyenne ordinance the same as the Laramie ordinance?
It is,
Yeah,
They're identical.
This is Laramie County
Laramie County.
ordinance.
Laramie
Not
County.
Laramie, yeah.
I'm
So
sorry.
it is Cheyenne.
Cheyenne, yeah.
Very good. Yeah. I always forget that those,
Councilman Bates.
One question. You mentioned you have colleagues down in Laramie County and Cheyenne. Do some of them operate from their own personal house?
No, they all have professional offices.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Henley, who do we have next on that list?
Mayor, next would be Stephanie Sneed.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilman. I am actually also here with Savannah, and she's going to be speaking for our group. However, I would like to let you all know that there's a group of us, massage therapists in town, who wholeheartedly agree that something needs to be done. However, we think the current ordinance that is proposed is also a little long. And so we're working with our attorney, Marty O'Blaster, and then there's a gal from their office, Hallie. They're at Corthell and King, and they've been in touch with Mr. Henley here, and he is going to be sending them the write-up from tonight, and they're going to be working with us gals and guys and whoever else would love to join us. But we're trying to put together a proposal that we think would be great, because we also think there should be regulations and all of that. So, but Savannah was going to share for our group. So So is it okay if I sit down, or do you want her to just come up and join me?
No, that's fine. You can come up and join her.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilman. Thank you for letting us speak. My name is Savannah. I've been a massage therapist for over 3 years. I'm currently licensed in the state of Utah. I work with a local chiropractor here in town, and I am insured through the American Massage Therapy Association. I would like to make a quick note that massage therapist is the correct term for us within the occupation. Please refrain from using masseuse, as it is commonly associated with sexual services, which we do not provide. Licensing and regulating massage therapy is something that we can all agree on. We are professionals and deserve to be recognized as so. Anyone who is not properly educated in the massage field should not be able to say that they are. And we know that licensing will help shut down the questionable practices in Casper. However, the current proposal is not the most effective way of doing this. Our concerns are that the proposal will put honest massage therapists out of work, will financially and occupationally strain the rest of us, and will invade our clients' right to privacy. Massage therapy and prostitution are not the same business and require separate ordinances to address them. 24 massage therapists in Casper have gathered our thoughts about the proposal and the best way to tackle this situation. We have 2 solutions. The first is to approve licensing and make the process straightforward. Prove that we are educated through a school certificate, passing the national exams, or a current license elsewhere, similar to what Powell has suggested. Those of us who have been working legitimately for so many years should be included in a grandfather clause. Some of our schools don't exist anymore, and we may not be able to provide proper transcripts. These professionals should not have to give up their careers because they suddenly have to meet requirements where there previously were none. Most everything else in the proposal is not necessary. We have a specific list of what we would like to keep and remove, should we follow that option. The second solution is to forego the proposal altogether until the state decides to mandate licensing across the board. 2020 has been an incredibly difficult year for all of us with the pandemic, and the last thing we need is the financial stress and the potential to lose our careers. Or we could follow a similar suit to what Councilman Kathy has suggested with the board here in Casper. This will also allow the state to make a massage therapy board, which will enforce and regulate licensing for Wyoming, making it straightforward and easily managed. Thank you.
And I'd like to just make one comment to what you just said as far as grandfathering and whatnot. I know that was not in there, and that is something that we've added in. Our intention is not to put anybody out of business. We're not looking to do that. So keeping that in mind, we're very open to the grandfathering and looking at how to do that properly and making sure that we still follow through with our background and everything else. But putting people out of business or making somebody go start a new career because they can't find a transcript is the last thing on our mind. So anybody, Vice Mayor Lutz?
And I read through the grandfathering provision, sorry. Just playing devil's advocate, because honestly, like you all have pointed out, I'm not an expert in your field, just as you're not an expert in mine, so I'm not going to pretend that I am. But so basically what we're saying is, the comment was made of, watching YouTube videos and basically saying, I'm a massage therapist, and having people come into my bedroom or my guest bedroom and giving them massages and charging them money. So as long as I watched YouTube videos and did it 5 years ago, that's okay. But if I watch YouTube videos 6 months from now and do it, that's not okay. So I think that's where we have to be, we need to be, I guess, understanding the gravity of allowing that is basically we're saying it's okay that you did something wrong as long as it was before this specific date.
Councilman Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You ladies are concerned about the grandfathering thing, and I agree wholeheartedly with the idea that if someone has bona fidely been engaged in a profession for a certain length of time, that they can come in and prove that they should be grandfathered. But what worries me is you get somebody that, like Councilman Lutz says, well, yeah, I watched a video and I blah, blah, blah 5 years ago. And I've done a few massages here and there. And I had a massage thing 5 years ago. And then I had to close down for a while. And then I did this and then I did that. where do you suggest that we draw the line on this grandfathering, and where, because, and believe me, I am very sensitive to the idea that this kind of law, unfortunately, we have to regulate, but, the bad people. And it also, and regulating the bad people also affects the good people. And so, where would you suggest, and how would you want to see that grandfathering handled, so that we're legitimate operators get to keep operating, but people that are kind of just on the fringes, they're going to have to do something different?
I don't personally know anybody who claims that they are a massage therapist and doesn't have at least 500 hours of education. So I'm not sure, and you guys would know more about what you would want to do in a grandfathering clause than I would. But I don't want anybody claiming that they're a massage therapist without having any kind of education. The baseline for all of the states is 500 hours minimum. I believe most of us have all of that are here in this room. That's right. Yes, so I think the best way to go about that would be to prove some way, whether it's through being insured through the AMTA or passing the MBLEX, which is the national test for massage therapy, or having a certificate from your school or your transcripts saying that you have passed with grades. That should be what grandfathers you in.
However, I get where you guys are coming from. We do have quite a few individuals. There's one gal I know, she's been doing it for 17 plus years, and she went to school back in New York, and they didn't have licensing exams or anything like that. However, she has been practicing here for, I believe, at least 10 years. However, her school, like mine, which I only went to school 6 years ago, they're closed. And I do have my certificate of completion or diploma, whatever you want to say, and I can show you that I passed the MBLEX, that licensing exam. But with her, she's been practicing for so long, so I think that's where I don't know how we could go about it. And that's, I think, where we need to sit and discuss. And we're working with our attorney about this too. How do you go about legally doing this? It's an awkward situation, but I don't know if she has her certificate of completion or her diploma anymore, but is there something perhaps we could use, like tax records or something along those lines, to show she was had a legit business for X amount of years? But I think that's where she's talking about with the insurance and that sort of thing, but also continuing education. That could be something, whereas it drives a lot of us nuts that a lot of folks can just be like, hey, I'm a massage therapist. Like, you could choose. You're going to be a massage therapist tomorrow. Do you want to be? And so I get the gravity of the situation. And I think that's where we need to continue discussions, and where I don't have a legal mind. So we're working with attorneys, and you all have great ideas too. But I know we are open to ideas on how to go about regulating that, because, as you said, Mr. Huber, it's kind of disconcerting.
Sure. Okay, well, thank you. You addressed that. And I do want to make just one quick comment. The other lady earlier had said, well, how many of you ever asked if your therapist was licensed? I didn't, because foolish me, I thought that there was I was shocked when I found out that there was no, that this field was just wide open and everything, that there was no licensure, no nothing. I was just shocked at that. That's why I feel a sense of urgency with getting something going on this, is because I think that the public, maybe incorrectly assumes, as I did, that, this has all been taken care of, and now we find out that it hasn't. That's part of why I want to see the city of Casper get out in the lead on this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Bates.
You mentioned all the people in your group. How many are here in your group?
Who's in our group? Raise our hand.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I wanted to see how many of you there were. So I appreciate that. You said that you guys created a list of ideas for, let me back up. You mentioned that you would prefer us to forego this proposal altogether and wait for state, but yet you made a list. If you had a choice, would you prefer this to be forgo, or would you prefer us to see and hear your list of how this ordinance or what you think we need to kind of alter it? Which one would you prefer to see?
I'd prefer to see licensing here in the city to get a kickstart for the state to do it. I'd eventually like to see Wyoming as a whole, which can provide a board to enforce any regulations within all of the cities in Wyoming. That's the reason why I've kept my Utah license, so that I have something to show to people when they say, are you licensed? Yes, I am. It's just not here because we don't have anything here to do that. I think we can all agree that licensing is very important and it should be implemented here, but most of what's included in the clause is not really necessary and impedes on a lot of our clients' privacy and our privacy rights.
Okay, and one more. You know, Miss Aguilar, is she in your group?
She
No.
was not a part of the group chat.
Okay, so I would be curious to have you share that with her, because she has the credentials, she has the knowledge. It'd be neat to kind of have you share it. Also, another person that has contacted, I've spoke to, I'm going to visit him tomorrow, is Mr. Dino. I don't know if he's in your group, but what I'd like to see is if you guys have a list of ideas for this to kind of alter it to fit most of you, I'd love for you to share that with them, get with them, and whoever else is out there that I don't know about, and have them view the list, get their opinion. And I'd love to have you guys bring it back to us, because I'll be, as they said, but also I'll be the first one. If any of you've emailed me, I hope I've emailed you back. If not, I will. Some of you I've talked to, I know nothing. I've never had a massage, other than from my wife, and sometimes that's not great. Just kidding. But I know nothing about it, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend to. So the more you guys can bring back to us, I think would be appreciative, and I would like to see more of it. But bringing in those that aren't in your group to get their thoughts of it as well. So that's it.
I'm going to make a comment real quick. I have talked to Marty, your attorney, and I know that she's putting all of your thoughts together and is going to present them to Mr. Henley, and I think she was going to send me a copy of them also. But the biggest thing I think when it comes to grandfathering that you guys really need to be thinking about, and I want to use Tracy as an example because she said it up here tonight. I mean, when you talk about somebody that has 1,000 or 1,100 plus hours of training, and then you potentially have somebody that maybe just hasn't had any. We go back to, I watched a YouTube video and I decided to be a massage therapist today. It does not seem right, doesn't seem fair, and it doesn't seem like it's the right way to go, period, to grandfather somebody in that watched one video on how to do a massage, but then you have other people that have devoted thousands of, over 1,000 hours to doing it the right way. And so, when we say we don't want to put anybody out of business, we don't, but also understand that if people want to stay in the business, they can't, you can't watch one video and call yourself a massage therapist. So I'd really like to see what your thoughts are and have Marty present those to us, and what the thoughts are on how to grandfather people properly and make sure that they have the proper amount of training in order to follow along with what we're trying to do. Councilman Cathy.
On that grandfathering part, that's something that I wanted to mention, is that in my profession, and I'm a licensed engineer. And first of all, I can't practice, and I can't even say that I am an engineer and sell engineering services in the state of Wyoming without an engineering license. if I do that, that is a criminal violation on the part of the firm that's doing that. So I appreciate what you're talking about the legitimacy of what you're trying to do. By the same token, and I don't know what the current rules are for grandfathering, but I know years back, you used to be able to even be an engineering tech. And if you had enough experience, then the people that your peers, would actually write letters of recommendation certifying under perjury, blah, 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 that yes, this person is competent. So that may be, that's just an idea, but that's something that we should look at as to how other groups do that. Something else that I know that happens in the dentistry profession is that periodically dentists from other states are sent out to new licensees before that license is granted to actually view and witness their procedures to make sure that they're not going into your mouth with a chisel and a ball-peen hammer, and that they know what they're doing. So there are several things and options out there, and I think that's part of what I was leading to about a discussion of how some of these things could try to be accomplished. So we do appreciate it, and I can definitely respect wanting to be licensed. I think that is a good thing. And yes, we don't deal in health safety, we deal in public safety. The bridge falls down, the water plant craters, the sewer treatment plant craters, the power plant craters. Yeah, we've got some of those same issues that you don't want the guy that watched the 10-minute video on how to build a kid's bridge in his backyard out building the bridge over our river here. So, thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Henley, did we have anybody else? Or was that? That's it? Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll open it up to discussion further on this amongst council. And a couple things that I want to say is that I get where you're coming from, Councilman Powell. I think it almost comes down to, we don't want to tell people how to run their business. They should be able to run their business the way they want to. But there are certain health guidelines that need to be followed. And I personally think cleanliness, especially in this business, should be a part of the guidelines that they have to follow. And maybe it might be a little bit overreaching, but I just think that it just makes sense that you don't want one person going in there and not have a guideline telling people that you need to do what makes sense. Put new sheets on the bed, put new clean towels out and whatnot. I was listening to the lady talking about being licensed in Utah, and then we talked about the fact that there's 48 different states out there that are licensed, or we're one of 2 or one of 4 that are not. So I wonder if we shouldn't be, instead of, again, we reached out to Laramie County to get a copy of this, but maybe we should be reaching out to some of these other states that are not, or that have licensing in place, and what are the common things that we need to be looking at, and what's the common, what's the outline that they have, and don't reinvent the wheel again. Let's use what they have and help that put us into place, or put this ordinance into place. I really feel that some of these things in here, we don't need to tell people how to dress, and that's why I ask if there's something on the health side of things that we need to be looking at for that, then great. But if not, I mean, I think that's really stepping out there a little bit too far and telling people how they have to do that. And then the other thing last thing that I'll say is that, I look at, we get fire involved and we obviously we need to go in and do those type of inspections, but I also don't want to see that get to a point, and I'll go back to the food trucks and we'll go back to the pizza oven, and I hate to do that because we put those things away, but I was a firm believer on the pizza oven. You have a company that builds them, and they're built to spec, and somebody far higher than our local fire department. Nothing against them here; they're following a code that is put into place. But somewhere somebody said, "Hey, if you put this you know, this functions on its own the way it's supposed to, but then when you read the book, it contradicts it and says, put this hood over the top of it, which would start a fire too, potentially. And so we end up banning them. I don't want to do that. I don't want to put things in place because we overburden it. We do that too often, it seems here. We overburden things with looking at what, you know, international code says we have to do, and then we apply everything to it, and before you know it, you can't do it, just because of the fact there's too much that's been put on it. So I think the right things need to be put in place to protect people, keep people safe, and do it right. But we don't need to go overboard and over-regulate this thing to where it becomes a huge ordinance when it could simply be, you know, 1 or 2 pages, not 16. So that's my thoughts. Councilman Huber.
I'd kind of like to a little bit butt in and make a suggestion here. I don't think that there's anybody, and if there is anybody on the council that wants to just move forward with this ordinance, this proposed ordinance as it is, if they, you know, if everybody else wants to just move forward with it right now, then, you know, that's that. But what I was going to suggest, and is rather than spending a huge amount of time here tonight, because I don't think that we're going to draft an ordinance and wordsmith an ordinance here tonight at this. I would be very happy to serve with Councilman Cathy on a committee, work directly with Mr. Henley, get input from anybody else that wants to have input on this, and try to bring something back to the council at a work session 2 weeks from tonight to move on this. Because, you know, I'd really like to see this move forward. And frankly, I don't think that it's something that should take a huge lot of time to do. I think it's something that should be done carefully, but you can do things carefully and still move forward expeditiously on it. And that's what I would urge, and that's what I would volunteer to do. And that's my suggestion.
Councilman Powell, and then I'll come back to you, Councilman Hopkins.
Well, thank you. I don't want to call anyone up to the podium again, but there is an American Association of Professional Massage Therapists or something to that effect. Is there a set of ethical standards? Yes. Okay. I believe, Mr. Mayor, that we should look at those ethical standards because I suspect they say things about cleanliness and space and proper techniques so that, and if we defer to those things and say, you must follow these ethical standards, then we don't have to put them all in the ordinance, which again is how it works in my profession, and I suspect Councilman Cathy's as well. So rather than being so prescriptive, to simply say, follow the ethical standards, and if you don't, you can lose your license.
And I would agree with that. I guess what I was saying is let's not just kick it out the window and say, well, we shouldn't talk about cleanliness, period, or look at that. If there's standards that are there, incorporate those standards into it. Refer back to them. Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we need to really look at the whole concept again. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, but we've got several things that are going along right now. First of all, we are the city of Casper. We are not Natrona County.
Correct.
We have three other cities that are our neighbors. And it looks to me like it may make more sense to do this in conjunction with the county, but due to the fact that there's a significant number of council people probably leaving council on November 3, in effect. Not that we won't be here at the end of the year, but I think that should enter into our situation because they've done this in Natrona County for the entire county. You know, they have Burns out here and they have Chugwater here, and then there's Cheyenne. We don't have that situation, and I think whatever we're doing, we ought to, if we're going to start it, we at least ought to do it consistently within the county. And again, with the timing involved, I'm not sure that this ordinance needs to be done by January 1. But I think we have time to think about it. We have time to gather up a lot of stuff, but we also have time to talk to the other cities around us and the county. If the county has no interest in seeing this, that would be a good piece of information to have. But we can get that fairly easily.
And I can answer back to you on that. I have not talked to any of the other cities, but I have talked to Commissioner, and it sounded like they were for moving forward on something like this. Not all of them all together, but I do know that There's at least one that in that discussion was like, absolutely, we need to do this. So we should have those discussions and see if they're, in fact, we will. At our next mayor's meeting, we'll bring that up.
I was gonna say, that's basically what Bob is talking about, is not wanting to do, and you are as well, not wanting to do with this what we did with the smoking issue. Because all we did was, we didn't stop anybody from smoking, we just drove some businesses out of Casper and out of business, and we don't want to do that either, so, yeah.
Councilman Powell.
One point of order, it was the public that did this, not the council, the smoking ordinance. A majority of the voters.
Councilman Pacheco.
So I'm sorry, I
Oh.
just wanted to.
Go ahead.
I wanted to speak on the grandfathering issue. In Councilman Pacheco's profession, we licensed counselors probably about 20, 25 years ago. And so this was a big issue, is how are we going to keep people from, how are we going to keep from running people out of business? And the way that was handled is that basically some core courses were defined, and that you must show proof that you've taken these courses if you didn't go to an accredited school. And so it seems to me there might be some way to create that with the assistance of these folks. And I'm sorry, if someone lost all their transcripts and the school closed, I don't have a lot of sympathy for you. So you should be able to prove that you completed a certain core set of courses and that you passed those courses and earned some type of certificate or degree. So that's how that was handled, and I suspect if we do research on the other states that have followed this similar problem, they probably did something similar to that, to say, if you didn't go to an accredited school, prove that you took these courses and passed them. And so there is a way around that.
Okay, Councilman Pacheco.
Yeah, my only final thoughts were in hearing both sides, which I appreciate and helps give me more clarity of what we need. Part of that is also that in the years of working on council, that I also find that a big part of it in legislation that we don't see nationally is that working together when you create legislation also means compromise. And part of that is that please understand that as you work together, that you're not going to get every part that you want, but that you work together for the betterment of not only your profession, but also for the betterment of your community. So when you work together and as you craft that in this committee to sit and say, okay, what can I live with? What can I live without? And how do we do this? And I always take it, what can be pragmatic? What is my pragmatic approach that's going to help benefit the profession that you guys do? Because we definitely need these types of stuff. But as you move forward with that, and you'll have our support.
Vice Mayor Lutz.
So I like the idea of establishing a committee and then obviously basically inviting individuals from the profession to participate on that committee. I feel like there is kind of a lot to be done in the sense of probably, I would guess, at least a handful of committee meetings, reaching out to the county and then potentially reaching out to other states and seeing how they do it. So I would ask that we revisit it at the work session on October 13th, because I mean, that's roughly a month. And I think that I feel like that's a lot to do in a month.
Councilman Huber.
With all due respect to some of the views that many of you have expressed, I really truly think that you're overthinking and overcomplicating what should be a relatively simple thing. What I would like to see is a fairly straightforward, easy to read, simple ordinance that touches on the critical points that we all agree, I think, and I think all the speakers agree, should be addressed. I don't see where that's a big complicated thing that's going to take us months to do. And furthermore, I really resist the idea of kicking the can down the road and waiting for somebody else to do this. You know, this has been in the public arena for, what, a couple months now, or at least a month. I haven't seen any of the other municipalities come forward and say, we want to do something. I haven't seen the county come forward and say we want to do something. Once again, I favor the idea of let's get out in the lead and let's do something with this instead of kicking the can down the road and waiting for somebody else to do something, which quite frankly, they probably won't. And so what? If we've got some operators that don't want to comply with reasonable regulations and a reasonable set of straightforward standards, they can go wherever they want to outside of this town, as far as I'm concerned.
Councilman Bates.
You stole my thunder about October 13th, so, but two things. One, I do want to get their list or theirs ideas. I do think we need to take time and look at that. But as Miss Ann pointed out, and I think a couple other ones did, is this two different, not two different ordinance, but two different views? There's the legal side of it, the criminal one, and then the health one. And is that what we really need to separate the two and look at it two different way, in that two different manners, and instead of trying to combine it all into one thing? So as we move forward, as we look at other states, as we look at the list, maybe that's something, as Councilman Powell brought up, he kept referring to, I want to say, or maybe I'm wrong, but the legal side of it, the criminalized side of it, and then the health. I think we need to look at it in that two perspectives, in my opinion.
Okay. So, Mr. Henley, I guess what I would ask is that I'm looking forward on our next work session. It looks like it's pretty packed anyways, and it would really be packed if we put this in on there. So I would say that being we don't have an October 13th work session drawn up at this point, that we move it to that date. And that will give us plenty of time to talk about it and get answers to a lot of these other questions as to whether other municipalities or the county is wants to be involved in this discussion, and then, of course, getting everybody's input and drafting this the way that it should be drafted. I agree with Councilman Huber. I don't want to push it down the road, and I want to get something done, but it just makes sense that we give us ourselves, there's a lot that needs to be done. So I think October 13th would be the best way of doing that. And then I don't know if Jolene is out there, but maybe if she could have a sign-up sheet for whoever wants to be involved. The only thing I would ask is that if there's a group of 20, like you have, and Marty Oblasser is speaking on your behalf, I'd prefer to have you go to Marty and have Marty send that to us. Not saying that I don't want you involved in our conversation, but you have a mouthpiece for that. And the last thing that is going to be productive is getting 60 or 70 people in a room that all have different opinions on it. So I'd rather have Marty put together your group's thoughts, and then anybody else who wants to sign up, if they could maybe see Jolene on the way out, who's standing by the back door, and put your contact information down. And then if Councilman Huber and Councilman Kathy want to be a part of that, then we could set up a couple times to sit down and meet with you and go through the items and see if we can't pare this thing down. Is everybody, do you agree with that, or?
Yes, if I may, Mr. Mayor, well.
Okay, Councilman Bates.
I know you mentioned the food trucks, fire code, all that good stuff, but I do believe that they should be in part of the conversation to a point, because what we did to one, regulating them, I think we need to include them in this, because it is we passed an unsafe structure ordinance and all that. I think they need to be included in it. The police department in that whole group, I think we need to have them part of it.
So with all due respect, city staff obviously would be involved in that. We would obviously have law enforcement, fire, the people that within the city that need to make those decisions would obviously be invited to that meeting also. So, Councilman Powell.
Just a request, Mr. Mayor, could we get a copy of those ethical standards put in our council packet? because I suspect if we looked at those, we would see a lot of the concerns outlined in the ordinance covered.
Do we have those yet, though?
I don't believe we have them, but I did talk with the governmental relations person with the American Society, or the society, and I suspect she could forward them to me, and I suspect Ms. Aguilar may have them as well.
Okay. Looks like she does, so.
Mayor, one question. If people that might want to participate in the committee that weren't here physically tonight, are you going to have a size and let other people sign up, or will it just be those folks that were here along with some city representatives?
That's a good question. Again, I personally feel that the more people you get involved in the conversation, the more it's going to get out of control. And I'd like to keep it to be a structured discussion so that we can have frank discussion about it and create something. But I don't know, what's everybody's thoughts on? Is there a limit that you want on the amount of people in there? Vice Mayor Lutz.
I don't know what the number is. I mean, obviously, you're going to have to maintain social distancing for an in-person meeting, so chances are if you have more than, probably 20 people sign up, it's going to have to be a Zoom meeting regardless. I do think, though, that I don't think I'm comfortable with just saying that because they're here, they have the right to be on the committee. I mean, people have jobs and responsibilities. They might not have been able to be here tonight.
I agree with that.
Councilman Pacheco.
I would probably keep it under anywhere between 10 to 15. I wouldn't go any much bigger than that, because I think then you get into, it does get a little bit bigger than that, but I think 10, 12 people is probably a good.
Okay, and our portal is still open, correct, Julie? Okay, so I would say the cutoff is 15. And if people here want to be, I guess it'd be first come, first serve. So portal being open, people that are here, people that see this, whatever gets reported out there, I'd say the first 15 would be sufficient. Anybody else? Councilman Kathy.
Well, I think just saying 15 is, and the first 15 is not necessarily a good way of going about it. We have 20 people here tonight, and I'm just pulling that number out, but the majority of the people here are all from one group. So I would think that basically they should be able to have a spokesman and one person could come. I don't need them to be the 15 to run out and sign up, because we know the view we're going to get. But the lady here, and I'm terrible with names, so I apologize, but the lady here I know is the group for one. The young lady that came up and spoke over here that doesn't belong to the group would be another. I remember you came in the other night and were speaking about one of your particular issues. So I can think of 3 different groups right here that would be here. I know Mr. Wanino is very opinionated, but he should probably be included in that list, because he has wound up sending us and going through the ordinances various times. So I think that starts to be the group that we need, and we need the varying opinions more so than the one opinion.
And that's why 5 minutes ago I said that the attorney that is representing the group of 20, I asked that attorney to pass her information forward to us. So if there's other groups.
The way they want to do it.
Yep. If there's other groups, we don't need 3 people from the same group come tell us the same thing. If you have one spokesperson, that would be awesome to handle it that way. And that way we get your viewpoint from your group.
Excellent.
And the portal's open. So if I'm completely wrong and you guys think of a better way of doing this, get on the portal. Jolene will read it to us and say, hey, somebody came up with this idea, and then we could run with that. So.
That's what I was interested in. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Councilman Huber.
I'm not going to be available from the September 30th until about October 14th, 15th. And so that I'd like to do some work on this in the next 2 weeks.
Okay. Okay, anybody else? Anything else on this, Mr. Henley?
Do you want to have one of the council members volunteer to chair, or do you want to have Jolene or someone from
I
my
think
office.
Councilman Kathy was
Yeah.
preparing to volunteer for that.
Well, Bing's Councilman Huber will be gone for a portion of the time frame. Councilman Kathy can share that if he wants.
Yeah, I hear the train coming. The only thing is, elk season opens on the 15th, so we need to make the meeting on the 13th short, because I got to get to elk camp. But yes, I will be more than happy to do that. Kathy at casperwy.gov. And I will try to respond to your emails. And if you folks, as you sign up, can give Mr. Henley your email addresses, we will try to figure out a date within the next week. Once we all get our limbs cleaned up from Snowmageddon 2, we can go ahead and try to get a meeting scheduled within the next week.
So anybody that does want to be involved, Jolene Martinez is at the back door, so if you just put your information down, email address and your name and maybe a phone number would be the best way to handle that. So, okay? Are we good? All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll move on to the SRO report. Mr. Henley. Or actually...
Thank you, Mayor. I know at some point last council meeting, there was a question about the school resource program and how it's progressed and the like. And I know that Chief McFeeters had completed a memo for you and, of course, is familiar with the ins and outs of that. So with your permission, if the chief could come up and visit with you.
Absolutely.
And I didn't see Ryan Dabney there, so maybe he's the one. Sorry, Ryan.
Chief's going to delegate this out pretty quickly. I would just tell you from an administrative point of view that we appreciate the relationship that we have with the schools. We believe it's a strong working relationship. We believe that our SROs are making a difference. It was very early on, as I previously reported to this council, very early on that we scored some wins. Students came to us and because of a rapport had been established with an SRO, reported heinous crimes that had been occurring in their lives for years that we were able to take action on. Other crimes have been prevented, without question, in my opinion. This has been an unqualified success. It's good to have the presence in our schools. The school district continues to work with us. The contract that was recently brought to the council for approval is a result of 3 years of refining and looking at the services that we're providing to them. But I would extend to you my belief that this is a model of success, that a community our size can benefit from having the interactions with our youth. And it's my expectation that we will receive dividends, positive dividends for generations to come as we make positive changes in the lives of these children, putting them on, opportunities to mentor them, guide them, to help them resolve conflicts and to help them resolve personal issues that they're having in their lives. Those will pay dividends well into their collegiate years and their productive years as they get jobs and remain in our community and become productive citizens. With that in mind, absent any questions that the council may have of me, I will turn the time over to these two gentlemen who have been managing this program for the last 3 years.
Good evening. Appreciate you guys having us come here and speak on behalf of our program. This is something that Sergeant Jones and I have put a lot of time and effort into, not only of selecting the SROs, but making sure they fit not only into the school district, but into the kids' lives that we're trying to have an effect on. The first picture you see there, just to kind of show you what we're building here, is not only do they go to the schools, but they have a piece in the community that they go out and take part in. So Sergeant Jones went out, made sure that they had a project, and they go and maintain the bridle trail twice a year. Braille Trail twice a year. And it's a project that they all go and do, and it creates a teamwork, a camaraderie within the SRO group. So they have some buy-in not only with each other, but in a project that they can put their teeth into. So we kind of had to come up with a mission for the schools, for the officers that work there. And, you know, this kind of breaks down kind of in a nutshell of how we view them and their day-to-day presence and what we expect to get out of it. The Casper Police Department School Resource Officer Program is focused on building relationships with our next generation. It's very important that we look at that because they are the generation that we will see coming out into this community and being effective participants, you know, for a law-abiding, ethical community that we like to see. We take stock in these children. And you'll see the pictures in here that we have of these officers working with these kids. They're passionate about it. They wouldn't be there if they weren't. So when we look at them emerging from the schools, you know, we want to have a piece in that mentorship. We want to say, hey, I remember Sergeant Jones when I was 15, and he came in and helped my problem, or Officer Whitler, or Officer Garrett. You know, any of those officers that are in there that have a hand in that, they may be on a call one day, and they have 3 or 4 kids standing in line to say, hey, I really need to talk to you. I have a question. Or here's what's happening in my house. And although they may go and split off into a different, you know, kind of societal stretch, if you will, but they have that piece of mentorship that we've offered them. So we want to have that presence in the school district. We spread loaded. You know, we made a promise to the district that we'd touch every school. We would be in every elementary school. We would high five the kids. We'd be there and be unpredictable in our movement. To try and be able to have a presence in the school where if somebody wanted to do something bad or heinous, they didn't know where we were going to be, and we would be able to be unpredictable in our movements. So the school district, you know, again, it's a partnership. They have buy-in, we have buy-in. We take, you know, time to be able to meet with the principals. We take time to be able to meet with Chris Jasang, who's the new Safe Schools director, along with the other pieces that they just gave him. The officers that we have in here, we didn't take light of what their experience was in the department, what they can offer to the school district. If you look up here, Officer Simon's been here as long as I have, you know, maybe save a year. He's a field training officer. He's a bomb tech. He is a master police officer, which means that he's been in those positions long enough to gain that title. You know, Officer Maurer, they beg him to be an SRO forever. You know, that's how much stock Kelly Walsh puts in Officer Maurer. He is like their mascot. They have names for him, which I won't bring up in here, but they like that kid. He is part of their school. Officer Galloway, you know, he's kind of an unsuspecting officer. You wouldn't have thought this SRT guy, this high-level operator, would go in and have a kid this big come up and say, I'm having problems at home. Can you sit down with me and talk about the issues I'm having? None of us expected that. Sergeant Jones didn't expect it. I don't think the chief expected it. But he is an integral member in that school. Kids come and talk to him. And we have a litany of those officers in there. You know, currently we have 10, Sergeant Jones and 9 officers in that SRO cadre. So daily responsibilities, each of them go to their schools. They have primary schools. Generally it's the high schools and the secondary schools that are the junior highs that are the schools that we're going to have the most impact in as far as if there's crimes or if there's fights or things that are of criminal nature. So we meet with the principals, we find out what the day-to-day activities are going to be going through the school district. We make sure we kind of have a roadmap of how that day is going to go, how that week's going to go, and we move to the campus supervisors. Campus supervisors are kind of like, you know, the interwoven school members into the kids, and the kids come to them as well and tell them things, and the officers have a relationship with them. What it gives them is it gives them some kind of buy-in to the school to where we feel like we have a team effort in that school. You have high schools that are 1980 for NC and just below that for KW or just above it for KW. They fluctuate back and forth as far as student numbers. You know, so we try and have, you know, at least an SRO in there all day long, if not 2, to be able to, you know, be able to get with all those kids in those schools. We have a time where we try and, you know, take time to at least go to the lunchroom. You know, not maybe high schools you're not giving high fives or knuckles or something like that, but they've had those kids for 4 years now, Officer Maurer especially. So he can sit down, have lunch, and say, hey, you know, what's going on in your life? How's your parents? You know, does your sister graduate? They know those things about those kids. providing counseling to victims of, you know, or troubled students, either or. We have that all day, every day. As you'll see in a slide coming up of how many contacts we have with students on a daily basis or on a yearly basis. Creating calls for service for criminal activities. The reason I put that down at the bottom is we're not in the schools to punish the kids. We're in the schools to make sure they have a good mentorship. We don't want to go and create criminal calls for kids. Do they pop up? Absolutely. We know the, you know, the elements we have coming back into the schools this year, and we understand the problems that we're going to have, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to mentor these kids and build relationships so that we have a good relationship going down the road when they're adults. So school safety and crime prevention, dangerous students on campus, and any activity that may be of a lascivious nature for those schools. Those are something that the SROs are supposed to be figuring out and talking to kids and making sure that they understand what's happening. You know, if you look at a high school, it's a small city. You know, if you have 2,000 kids, just to make it an even number, and you have 270 staff or more, that principal's running a small city at those high schools. And that's how they have to look at it. I'm going into a small community every day with a variety of issues, some good, some bad. Anti-bullying education, the one on the acronym there is SEPTED. I went through along with Officer Simons, and we've evaluated every school for its weak points and how we can harden that school to make sure that you can't drive a vehicle bomb into that school, to make sure that you know, or it would be more difficult to do that, to make sure that, you know, we're looking at entrances and exits. And we've done that for all the schools. I think we have maybe 2 or 3 elementary schools left in there. So that's another added bonus that the schools get when you have people like Officer Simons in there. Traffic safety, we work the school zones and make sure that people are going slow. We don't have kids getting hit in the school zone. Patrol helps out with that. School walkthroughs, again, like I said before, we try and touch every school every day. We try and get to those elementary schools and make sure that we're meeting with those kids, sitting down, reading books with them, going to the games, so that we can have that interaction. Staff and student education on drug trends. If you haven't seen the trending of what we're dealing with now, the shatter, the wax, the mixed drugs that kids are getting into now that are sending them to the hospital, we teach those to the schools so that they understand it. Kind of like the DARE program, only a little more integrated into the schools. I know that's a big, meaty portion. I'll maybe get you questions at the end. Visible law enforcement, a classroom resource. Sergeant Jones has a bachelor's in English. He goes and teaches English classes. He's going to throw some law enforcement background in there, but he gets that opportunity. The teacher says, hey, come in, please do this. The community resource, the thing that we can provide, we had at the very beginning of the year 2 tragic incidents with 17-year-old kids. We provide a counseling resource. We know that we have these victim services at the police department that we can offer. And we knew about that ahead of time to get into the schools early to be able to provide that to not only the teachers, because they know those kids, but to the students that could be their sister, their brother, or a good friend that they no longer have. We don't serve as disciplinarians. That is not our role in the schools. We try and help with the counseling thing, but you know that's the school's responsibility. We do come back in on the back side of it, maybe where it does become criminal or it does become dangerous, to protect the staff and the students. And then obviously we want a positive role model. And the reason I have that SRO triad up there is we have to be all those things all the time. We may be writing a ticket, but we're also giving a counseling session on, hey, how's your life going? There's a catalyst to this ticket that you're getting. What happened that brought you to this point? And again, being the positive role model. Obviously, Officer Maurer, again, integrated in schools, officer of the quarter. You know, we put him there in that photograph just to say, not only do we have good officers in the school, but they're doing good things inside the department. So 285 parental contacts. That's 285 probably sets of parents that we're talking to annually from either a problem with their student or maybe an emotional problem with their student that they felt more comfortable coming to an officer than a school counselor. SROs assisted in 1,183 student issues that probably weren't criminal. bad day, hey, I need advice, I'm going to this college, I heard you went there, how do I go down that road? We've provided food and clothing, we've had officers go buy lunches for kids, you know, helping them get out of an unsafe home. All those things go into the daily activity of that SRO. Home visits for kids that don't show up to school, we've been asked to go do those. Welfare checks on students that should have been in school that aren't. Assisting victims of a crime. We have, unfortunately, assaults in the schools. A variety of different kinds of assaults that happen that officers have to deal with on a daily basis. You know, we had a school that was 1 week, we had 11. You know, so that they see that daily. And then facilitating access, again, to community resources. Assault is it's a whole different animal. It affects people differently. So we try and get them into those programs, not only within the school to help with the school counselors or something like that, but to get them outside of the school. You know, and unfortunately, it doesn't always fall to the students. We've had, you know, other issues that have came up that had to do with, you know, kind of interwoven people inside the schools. If you look on here, obviously our biggest thing is either disturbances or tobaccos and vape. You know, it hasn't changed in the 2,700 years that Sergeant Jones has been here, and it hasn't changed in the 15 that I've been here. It continues to be a problem. We try and get that education into the schools. Was 2,700 correct, or I was close? Okay. We work on the anti-bullying education. Obviously, we've had some weapons offenses in the school, and there's a variety of them, from, you know, the lower end of the brass knuckles, or hey, he had a bat in the parking lot, to kids bringing gun to schools. Obviously, we still have theft problems. As you can see in that picture, that is the aftermath, you know, of student property destruction and things that officers have to deal with in the schools. Again, Sergeant Jones teaching. Something that we do on a pretty regular basis. Every SRO is tasked with a class. They have to teach something at least every quarter to each school that they work in. We work on active shooter trainings in the schools. We bring the teachers in to work on those. We run drills with them. We make sure they understand what our role is, how we're going to do things. We assist with the evacuation drills with the students. The elementary schools are probably some of the harder schools to make sure that you're watching all those kids when you're just doing a drill and not making something more dangerous. Drug awareness, de-escalation tactics, those are all things that we work on with the teachers prior to school starting. We teach classes for their in-service right up into the first week of school. We have agencies that will call from outside the district, from parental discussions of, hey, the child is fully in my custody, and they've enrolled them in school here, and now, you know, they're in violation of, you know, a civil dispute, so they end up having to jump into the middle of a civil matter. And then the last part on this one, you know, again, this is something that happens weekly. Officer Garrett will go and read, Officer Maurer will go and read, they'll go talk to the FLS classes. You know, their reward for this is to see that kid graduate high school, to try and find some mechanism that they have had an impact on that child that wasn't criminal in nature, and if it was a positive interaction. And the reason Sergeant Jones is up here is if I forget something, but he's the backbone of that program. You know, I always joke that I'm just pulling the puppet strings, but the person that makes this work on a daily basis is Sergeant Jones. It's not me. And then those officers that work for him. So I open it to questions from the council. If you have any of me, I tried to be as brief as I could.
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Perhaps no question, but just a big thank you. I have family that's been in the PD business for years and retired from there. And I do know that my nephew, he was an SRO for, I think, about 3 or 4 years. And he said that was the most fun he ever had in the PD. Right. This is in Colorado.
And the SROs will come back and tell you that. I mean, like I said, there were some surprising aspects of it. Of, are you going to fit? And then they come back and they're like, this is the greatest job I've ever had.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Bates.
Along with the things, I have 3 daughters, 2 in high school, one's going to be graduating, and one in middle school, and they heard that you guys were coming tonight, because we talked about it. But anyways, my daughter Rachel and Galatia and Corinthia each wanted me to say thank you, because they love the high fives from your officers. They love getting to just talk to them about whatever is going on or not going on. One of them actually played basketball with my daughter and her friends in middle school, and just came in and started shooting hoops with them. So they asked me to tell you guys thank you for each one of them touching their lives. So I did what I was asked.
Councilman Huber.
I have a question, but first I have a comment. I particularly am pleased with the mission statement that the police department has here, because I think that, it is so totally important and correct that your mission is to establish good relations and to work with these kids, and that, because so many people, when they think about the cops and that stuff, all they think are guns and fights and blah, 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 and all that stuff. And, stopping school violence, which obviously is a very great importance. But for me, when we were adopting this a few years ago, my big thing was establishing these kind of relationships, and I am very pleased that that you guys have carried that through with your mission statement. I do have a question for Scott, though. If you've been here for 2,700 years, how many hundred years have I been around?
I'll defer to Lieutenant Dabney.
or does it just seem like you've had Scott for 2,700 years?
We had 26 years, is that where we are? 30, okay. So, I like to give him his due. Like I said, he's an important part of this program. I wouldn't run without it.
I was going to say your numbers are off, because Scott has been here forever and ever. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Powell.
It was just kind of a guess on our part of what we could afford and how many positions we could add. What's your opinion as far as the staffing level that you have? I'm sure you could use more. Do you seem like you're able to cover things with what you've got, Lieutenant?
Councilman Powell, I think we're in good shape. Right now, as Lieutenant Dabney indicated, we're fairly well covered throughout the city. Every high school, every middle school, and 3 of our elementaries, which also double as rovers to assess the high school and middle school. So I think we're in a good position right now. But we began a new school year under very unusual circumstances. So I would hold that or my evaluation of it until maybe after Christmas, so I have a better idea of are we making an effect one way or the other. So, but I think right now we're in good shape.
And then I just have a comment. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't recognize former Councilman Laird's role in all of this. He drove us all crazy, but he pushed for this, and I don't know that we would have moved forward if he hadn't kept bringing up the need to expand the SRO program. And so I want to give him his due. I don't know if he's watching or if anyone else is that can tell him. He played a very significant role in making this happen.
Nobody else? Scott, or either one of you guys can answer this, and it's just a question kind of off topic, but so obviously kids have a choice to go back this year, to go virtual. Are you seeing a majority of they've gone back to school, or?
Right now, Mayor Friel, memory serves, they're out of the 14,500 students, only 536 are doing virtual.
Okay.
The vast majority are in the schools, and they're having to do some shuttling around of classrooms due to a small room having 36 students where another has 10, so they're having to do some mixing and matching, but for the most part, the students, and they're very excited to be there.
Okay.
Mayor, one of the comments we heard, just on the teacher side was the virtual for K through 5. It's very difficult. It's hard enough to keep the attention in class. So what surprised them was the kids wanting, like craving to come back to that social structure. And even the officers, by the end of the summer, you know, they do different jobs throughout the summer, but we had a summer school piece that we had to go through. And from that, you know, you could tell that kids were just itching to get back to school. They didn't want to do virtual anymore. No parent wanted to do virtual anymore. Trust me on that one. But we have seen, you know, the parking lots are full at both the high schools. And I know from my own kids, he had 37 kids in his class, and they ended up saying somebody's got to go do something else. So the kids are back.
Well, I agree, nobody wants to do virtual. However, my kid got up this morning, looked at the snow, and said he could do virtual, which, no, he went to school anyways, but. Okay, anything else?
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for everything you guys do. I think it's a wonderful program. I wasn't here with Councilman Laird, but this was brought up the last time and was very low-key, and I'm glad to see it did go through. And we do appreciate everything you do, not only with your SRO program, but to the chief and everybody else in your department. I know the nationwide, you guys have gotten a bad rap, but I think you're doing an excellent job here, and I don't think the rap is deserved at all. And so you need something, we're more than happy to try to help you out and see if we can find the money. So, thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to agenda review. Mr. Henley, was there anything on the agenda that stood out we needed to talk about?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Okay, anybody else have anything on agenda review you want to discuss? Or add to, obviously we're adding massage on to the 13th of October, but anything other than that we need to add to the list? Okay. Legislative review, do we have anything there, Mr. Henley?
I know that based on some discussion at the last session, trying to see if we could get the county commissioners and the Wyoming Association of Municipalities to work together on collecting LADs and demolition liens to see if we could possibly structure something. I know that Carter has at least an internal meeting scheduled to try to flush that out a little bit, I think the end of next week. So that is out there, and see if we could get both of those organizations to kind of get behind it, we may have some success. I think there's less incentive for the county to get behind it because they won't be collecting the fees, but they're going to do the lion's share of the work. But I suspect some county commissioners would be fine with that, but others maybe not so much. So we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Okay. And then did you have something?
Sorry, just really quick on the agenda review, because I actually hadn't caught this before. Just a reminder that even though September has 5 Tuesdays, we do have a special meeting scheduled for the 29th.
That's what I was about to say.
Oh, good.
We do. And it shouldn't be a long meeting, but we do have some business that needs to be taken care of that night, so we do need to have that extra meeting. But it shouldn't be very long at all.
Is this an executive meeting or a regular meeting?
I believe it's a regular meeting, correct?
Regular
Yes.
meeting. It will be. This is basically a meeting where we had to have 3 separate publications in 3 successive weeks, and it has something to do with trying to help Natrona County and Wyoming Medical Center and Banner complete their deal before the end of the month.
Okay.
You'll be calling them, huh?
From a satellite phone. Okay, so we'll go council around the table. Councilman Bates.
Nothing.
Okay, Councilman Huber?
As some of you might know, we had a fire up on Garden Creek Road Saturday. If you look up there right now, you see a relatively small little burn spot, but I can tell you that was anything but a small little incident. And the outcome of that would have been totally, completely different had it not been for the assistance of the Casper Fire Department up there, as well as all the other agencies that came in to help us. But I really, truly want to compliment Casper Fire Department. Fire One, who was up there that day, took command, did an absolutely excellent job managing a very, very volatile situation that evolved very quickly. Chief 3 and Chief 4 were up there, you know, just really, truly, as well as all the on the ground apparatus and everything. They basically emptied the city and came up there and helped us. That would have been a totally different outcome had it not been for all of their help. And I really, truly want to thank the city on behalf of the Casper Mountain Fire District and pay a great compliment to how those guys handled it. On my best day, I couldn't have come close to handling things as well as what they did. And I think that's just real important. I gotta say one thing. Somebody mentioned about the food trucks and the manufactured ovens and all that stuff, and that the manufacturer certified that they were blah, 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 and that if you put a suppression hood over them, that they would, all kinds of bad things would happen. At least one restaurant here in Casper that had one of those, it caught on fire. And but for the suppression hood that the city of Casper required over it, the outcome would have been a lot different. So when we talk about those things, remember, sometimes the guys that know about that stuff know about it, and the manufacturers maybe don't know everything that they certify and think that they know.
Councilman Pacheco.
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Councilman Cathy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kind of off the subject a little bit, but I hope Jamie wasn't watching tonight, or you may wind up getting a massage with a skillet when you get home.
We'll see.
Okay. And I don't really want to know, but I would like to reiterate what Councilman Huber mentioned about the work, the camaraderie, that isn't the right word, the cooperation between all of the units with the fire on the mountain. If all of that wouldn't have come together between all of the surrounding agencies, the air support, we could have lost the front of the mountain. And so I think a big attaboy goes out to all of those people involved, not only just the Casper Fire, but the Bar None, the Mills, the Evansville, the Plain guys, Casper Mountain, everybody that was involved.
Wasn't there multiple fires at that day?
No, I
The
believe.
wind picked up debris and started.
There was only one fire up there. I don't know what other agencies
I thought there
had
was
anywhere
one
else.
at Bar None, and there was another one within the city proximity area, so they were all, yeah, I thought, anyway, so.
Don't know. That's all.
Okay, Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one little thing, and I forgot to do it. We had our SRO folks here, but I hope Chief McFeeters will pass along to the school district that we appreciate their financial help in getting the SROs into schools. Thank you.
Councilman Cathy, did you have something to add?
Yes, the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on Poplar now has a 5 over the 0.
All right.
So I don't know what that whole deal was, but it was 35. And yes, I saw the 30-mile-an-hour sign, and it is now back 35 again. So, and the 5 is added on over the 0. So. Just.
Councilman Johnson. Councilman Paul. Vice Mayor Luce.
Nothing tonight.
The only thing I have is last Friday, I think it was, they had the Heroes fundraiser. And I don't, Chief, I don't know if you know or not. Do you know how much money was raised for that?
I don't know, I wasn't able to attend, I was with the
Okay. But, you know, that's a hero fund that goes to all first responders, and it actually goes out statewide now, that anybody that ends up, first responder ends up sick, injured, or even death, they'd helps out the family or helps them out with medical bills, transportation, whatever they need. And it's gone statewide now. There was quite a turnout for it. I did participate in it, was able to give a speech at it, and it was well put together, and I think it was a pretty good outcome. So that's about it for me.
What hero were you?
What's that?
Did you dress up as a hero?
No, your first responders are your hero. We were supposed to have an executive session tonight, but that's been canceled. We moved that out because it wasn't time sensitive, so we moved it out till next week, I believe. So there'll be notice of that. So that's it for tonight.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.